Hey, it's Nancy, the nurse practitioner here from Caregiver Success, and welcome today. I have a wonderful guest with me today. His name is Kenn DeVane. He's of Bridgeport, Connecticut, where we're from. And we thought it was really important since we met one day recently that, we're all going to die. And a lot of people don't want to think about it.
At all. Right.
And Ken and I are going to talk about a bunch of things. So we're just going to go through some of the questions, and you write down what you're thinking about yourself from wherever you are in the world. I know different cultures, different religions have different views about it. Hey, I was in Curacao and people are buried standing up. We're driving around in a bus and I'm like, I'm raising my hand for the man who's driving the bus. He's talking about this building and the history. And I'm like, why are the people so close together? And I said, are they buried up, straight up? He says, yes, they're standing in their boxes. I was like, oh,
That's
wow.
Different. Mm-hmm.
So there's no cremation there. There were crosses everywhere. I just want to show you this foreboding list of when somebody dies, this is the stuff we're stuck with.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't prepare for us.
Correct. Someone else is going to have to do it for you.
Somebody's going to have to do it. And this is where the fights come in. We separate the men from the boys, the girls from the...
Mothers-in-law from the...
Oh my goodness, people don't talk to each other anymore. Yeah. So if it's in order, we can save a lot of trouble.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So Ken, why do people hesitate to make plans for funerals? Or their burial, I should say.
Fear. Everyone is afraid to talk about it. Mm-hmm. We hear many times from a wife who says, I'd love to plan our arrangements, but my husband doesn't want to go there, or vice versa, or whatever. The fact of the matter is, we're all going to die. Yeah. And we go through our lives and try and organize ourselves in terms of our education, in terms of perhaps getting married and 401k. Right?
Yeah.
But buying a home, taking a vacation, everything gets planned. Mm. But when it comes to the one thing that we all have in common, which is we're going to die, it's messy, so we don't talk about it, which means that someone else, near and dear to you, is going to have to literally pick up the pieces. And it becomes more expensive. Just imagine that you've just passed away, so there's all the sorrow that goes with that. But they don't have time to say goodbye because they're running around getting flowers and booking this and doing that and getting that. And therefore the goodbye is almost missed. Yeah. And even if you don't want to go through and plan everything, I'd say the second word after fear is education. At least understand the process. Yeah. Understand the options, the variables, and then roughly what it's going to cost. Because just like you budget your vacation, you can budget your funeral.
Can you actually have a plan, like a payment plan?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, there are many of the funeral homes, if you sat down and pre-plan with them, which you can, we'll put together a plan and you pay into that and they put it in a trust and go about it that way. Some people would prefer to have the pieces in the back of their head so they know what they're going to do. Some people commit it to writing. Here's what I want to have happen. But your life changes as well. You are going to have your uncle, the attorney, handle your arrangements, and he passes away. Now who catches the football? Yeah. So it's constantly moving and changing, just as your will would be. Roughly 30% of the population has a will, 70 do not, and it's the same problem.
It is the same problem.
You're in a car wreck, God forbid you die. Who's going to take care of all your stuff?
So there's two things that came up, everyone. I was talking to the nun and one of the priests at my church, and you don't have to be Catholic to have these discussions with anybody that you love or know. But they were saying that the thing that bothered them the most was that when somebody dies that has been at the parish for 30 years, loved going to church, they knew them so well, but their children weren't part of that world of theirs, living in, let's say, Newtown, Connecticut, where we are, and their kids live in California and Alaska, and then their mother dies, and they're like, we're not having a funeral, and we're not going to bury her here, and we're not going to, and the father told me, we don't know what to do with that because we have to abide by the wishes of the family,
Mm-hmm.
but we know the person better than the family knew them.
Right.
And their wishes were clear to us.
Correct. Right. But unless they are memorialized in some kind of a document, preferably notarized, there's nothing that they can do. And we've had situations where family members have actually come in after the parents have bought a plot and want to turn the plot back in because we're going to do something completely different. So it gets awkward for everybody.
That when something does happen in a family, and we were definitely thrown in our faces, my husband and I, this is my second marriage. His parents were in their 80s. And his father committed suicide in our backyard. He was 87 years old. Actually, I have a whole chapter in my book on geriatric suicide. He had a plan that the money was running out by the time he was 90, and he was 87. Wanted grandma to have the rest of the annuity. He was the bill maker. He's the one who had the open heart surgery. He's the one on all the meds. He's like, I'm going to check out first so she can have the money. So we found him hanging in our backyard in a tree. So mom calls up this number in Florida, where they're from. They come from Florida. They come to Danbury Hospital, morgue, pick up dad. 2 weeks later, we get him in an urn at the front door in a box. The urn dad picked out. I go down to Florida. I get mom. 3 years later, we stand at the tree. Did dad die in October? I said, no, mom, tomorrow, August 31st, this is his anniversary. And then she died October 12th. And it was a beautiful urn. She picked it out. She's got 7 brothers, sons and daughters. They would have fought like cats and dogs, and we didn't have to do a thing. And as tough as it was that dad hung himself, which was very hard on mom, we just had to make a phone call.
Right. Where we've had 2 sisters fighting over their mom because one sister wanted a picture of mom when she was a teenager on the crypt front in the mausoleum, and the other wanted a picture of mom when she was grandma. And they couldn't decide on it, so it went to like small claims, something or other. It gets emotional, and that's really what you're trying to avoid, if possible.
Yeah. So let's go on with some other things that are really important to talk about. We know that it's very fearful about doing it, but I like the idea of planning now that I'm 67, and it's like we need to kind of put some of our money away to start doing this, and we haven't done it yet either. And he's kind of saying, we don't have to do this yet.
We'll get around
to it.
I'll torch them when we're finished.
Yeah, would you please?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. So what is the first thing that we should do to get ready or to prepare for pre-planning, I should say? What should we do first?
Again, it's education. My suggestion would be go to any graveyard. And we're finding a lot of people, and in our cemeteries, we let people walk dogs, provided you clean up after it. And we have a lot of people who jog through it, walk through it, ride through it. But it's a pretty peaceful place. But walk through and look at the various tombstones, gravestones, markers, memorials. There's all different names from the rocks that are in there. And look at how people have remembered their past loved ones. Because there's lots of varieties, lots of different things you could do. And at the same time, think about, do you want what we call a full body burial? You would put it into a casket, and the casket would go into the ground. Or do you want to go cremation? In which case, you go into an urn, and you can be buried in the ground, or you can go into what we call a niche. Think of like a 12 by 12 box in the wall. It's in a mausoleum. It's usually an outside, but generally an inside structure as well. And a full body can go into a mausoleum in a space we call a crypt, which is no different than the crypts they had 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
You just slide it into the wall. You can slide it in with family members. You can buy as many as you want. And then they just put your name on the piece of granite or marble in front of it we call a shutter front. And we put your name and the day you were born and died, whatever you want to have inside of that. So understand the process. So do you want, if someone dies, do you call a priest first at a church? Do you call a funeral home? Do you call a cemetery? You can do all three. Everybody does things differently.
Right.
But if you understood the component parts of a burial and a funeral, we'll talk about the difference between those two, you'll know kind of in your head what you want to do first. And so you've now got a dead body, and something has to be done. Someone has to claim the body.
So can you sprinkle ashes anywhere you want?
You can. Some places, I suppose it's not allowed. You hear a lot of people sprinkling them on water and doing it, but generally speaking, yes, you can, into the urn.
And this family, they actually had a plot in White Plains, and the children wanted to use the plot. Mm-hmm. So we put them both in a box and had a real ceremony after COVID was over. So everybody had their something that they wanted out of this.
And this comes down to how you live and what's important to you in terms of how you memorialize, remember your loved one. So if they were fishermen and you are committed to, he wanted to, have his stuff sprinkled in the ocean, that's up to you. The one caveat I would have is that once he's in the ocean and gone,
right,
all you've got is here, and maybe that's enough for you.
Yeah.
But I always felt that I wanted to be able to go to a place where I could spend some time and look at what is remaining, the stone at their name, whatever, remember the memories. And that's how we're all different. And this really has to be personalized for you. We have 14 Catholic cemeteries in the Diocese of Bridgeport, which is really the county of Fairfield. We will bury any religion in the cemeteries.
I did not know that.
Right. And
cool.
We don't, some dioceses think differently. In this one, we take all people who care to be there. The one thing we say in our faith, the Catholic faith, is it's sacred ground. It's been blessed. And again, here, everybody's individual, depending on your faith, depending on what you believe in.
Right.
If you die and you are waiting for the resurrection of the Lord, and as we're now in Lent and we're coming up on Easter, which is the resurrection, you should rest in sacred ground so you can be raised. You can be buried anywhere, and surprisingly, really disappointingly, a lot of people are steered to cemeteries that are not Catholic, don't really have the conversation on, is it a Catholic cemetery a la sacred ground? And that's the decision that you have to make. But that's where everybody is an individual, and you make up your own mind about how you want to rest for the rest of your life. So a funeral is the preparation. Now, again, the assumption will be you're going to have a full body in a casket, and you're going to wake the person in a funeral home, and in which case the person has to be embalmed and all of that. So that's where a funeral director at a funeral home will grab the body, take the body from the hospital morgue, take it to their facility, and do the preparations. You would decide if you're going to have a wake, to have people come over. You will decide if you're going to have a mass. You will decide if you're going to have a coffin, if it's a full body, whatever it's going to be. If you're going to have a full body, you'll have a hearse to go to the cemetery. That's something that the funeral person does, the funeral director does. You can buy the casket from them. They can order the flowers for you. They can book the room for the wake. They can give you the mass cards. They can sell you a stone, a memorial stone, and take care of all that for you. So kind of one-stop shopping. They can call the church, make the arrangements with the priest. That is the funeral.
Okay.
After you have the funeral, the person has to get buried. That's the cemetery. So at the cemetery, before we proceed to the actual date that you're going to bury the person, you have to come to the cemetery. You have to purchase a plot or a niche, because we've got to put them somewhere. And if it's a in-ground burial, full body, we have to then dig the hole. In the state of Connecticut, you have to have a concrete vault that goes in first so the walls don't cave in.
Okay.
And then on the day of the funeral, you would come to the cemetery with the hearse, come up to where we're going to bury the person, and out of the hearse comes the casket, and it gets lowered into the vault, gets covered, and we put the dirt down on top. And then or make arrangements for a monument stone. We can sell you stones in the cemeteries. And we can, in order to put a stone up, you have to have a foundation. So in some ways, and I try to explain this to people, it really is, if we take away the emotion, we take away for a second the religious faith part of it, it is a real estate transaction. We are purchasing, and in effect, you're licensing it for the rest of your life. You don't own the grave, but you lease it forever. And we take care of it for you. And so there's a handoff between the funeral director and the cemetery.
Is there a fee after the person's buried?
Is there a fee after the person?
Like you said, there's nothing. Once you paid for the plot,
right,
and the stone and all the
correct, it's all
fixings.
done. So let's do some rough numbers. And I can't speak to the funeral home, but any funeral home can give you what their cost would be. But if you're thinking of a full body burial, you have to buy a plot. You can buy one person, 2 people, 4 people, 6 people. And that is going to cost you, just round numbers, just say between the plot, the foundation, the marker, all of that is roughly $10,000 to $15,000.
Okay. For one person?
For one person. Well, if you buy the plot, 3 or 4.
Okay.
The one person goes in, you now got the others that you paid for.
I see.
The state of Connecticut, and really I'm not sure that they anywhere lets you do this, but there is, we call an opening and closing fee, which is literally the backhoe digs the hole, drops it in. That cannot be charged before the service is actually rendered. So, and that's going to be somewhere in about $2,000.
Okay. So this is definitely a thought. It's really hard when somebody passes away and there's no money left.
Correct.
And then who's paying for?
Right.
That's
it becomes a Title 19 issue.
No.
And this can be handled by the funeral director if they wanted to, or if you want, the funeral director has to get the body cremated. So they would take the remains to wherever the facility is to do that. And now you've got if you're familiar with cremains, you are, right?
Yes.
So it's like a granular clay type thing, and usually it's in a brick block in a plastic bag that you then open the bag and pour into the urn, or however you want to do this. But if you're going to buy a niche in a wall, or you have a plot already and you want to put the cremated remains in the plot, there's the open and closing fee, and you can simply put the urn in and cover it right back up again. In which case, all you had was your opening and closing fee.
We're so portable in the way that now I see this thing about eco-friendly is don't use land because it's wasting space. The second thing I see is you can get a tree, buy it, seedling,
composted.
You could be put in the seedling with it and be part of the tree.
You care to do that. But to the point of folks being all over, I have a son in Washington State and a daughter in Massachusetts, and we already have our niche here in Connecticut. And it wasn't a question of we're going to go out and be buried by them because they could move the year after that, and then you're in the middle of nowhere. Right. So that's where, we talked before about the fear, and maybe fear is a bit of a harsh word. As much as you need to think ahead, that if the kids are not with us, and we like where we have lived all our lives, then are you going to stay here, or are you going to be cremated, split the bag in half, give one to one child, one to another, or to 7, and let them do what they want to do with it? It's not that this is an onerous or uncomfortable situation as much as it's a decision you have to make. Kind of like, are we going to go to Italy this year, or are we going to go to the Grand Canyon?
Yeah.
and then just just kind of go with it. And once I have found
Mm-hmm.
myself, and I know I in the business, but once we decided what we were going to do, where we were going to do it,
Yeah.
and it's done and it's documented,
Yeah.
you just don't worry about it anymore. Because if God forbid now you get ill, you get sick, you're going to go through the whole same process in the hospital with do not resuscitate orders and medical advisors and all this other stuff. And I remember being in the hospital with my siblings screaming at each other in the hallway about do we resuscitate mom or not resuscitate her.
Yeah.
It's an awkward conversation to have.
Yeah.
And again, if you plan, you don't fight. Along those same lines, you mentioned this sheet before. We call it 83 decisions in 72 hours when someone dies. And I go around and meet with different groups and talk about all this. But to put this in practical terms for you, your partner passes away.
Yeah.
And you want to notify friends and family that
Right.
this has happened. What's the passcode into your partner's phone to get the list of people that you have to notify? And most people don't know. Now what do you do? It's those things that you just don't think about. And if you do no planning when something happens, I guarantee you're not going to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
That if you took a step back now and just made a little list of 10 things to do, you would save yourself so much aggravation on top of aggravation.
Well, you know what? People that are medical, like me, have already. I know where his password book is, and I said, "Where's the box with all the papers?" Because if I hear you're not coming home, I know where to go.
Right.
I mean, I'll be upset and scared, but I will at least know what I have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you're right. You need to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Period.
And when you are scared, what better way
Yeah.
to get through that than to have a checklist of things that you have to do?
Yeah.
Because then you don't worry that you forgot, because we always worry about we forgot something.
So
And
this list is great. I mean, it's big. But if you guys like it, I mean, I will put it.
You can, yeah. Okay.
I'm going to PDF it. I will stick it on my YouTube channel. I will also put on my Facebook page for you guys, on my Caregiver Success page. This way, at least you have the list. And just at least it will get you started.
And on the back of it, on the actual sheet, we that's okay.
I had it here.
No problem.
Mm-hmm.
We show you what a columbarium is, what a mausoleum is. So you have a feel for what we're talking about when you hear these terms. Because consider buying a car. If you've done no homework before you go buy a car and you walk in the showroom, you have no idea what's coming at you in terms of options.
No homework.
Whereas if you've looked at it and you understand the terms, you're a better consumer for that. Overall, what's the pricing margins that I'm talking about?
It is a consumer product.
It is.
It is a consumer product. It's a real
estate and a consumer product.
Exactly.
And it happens to be the most important people in your life in terms of your loved ones. So why aren't they worth a couple hours of your time? Our folks go to the various conventions and they talk about trends. Mm-hmm. If you were on the West Coast, it has been really almost 80% cremations to full bodies. Mm-hmm. Canada, I think it might even be 90%. That's west of the Mississippi, I'd say 70 is average. East of the Mississippi, it's still been 60 full body, 40 cremation. And now we're finding late last year, now this year, I'd say we're rolling about 50-50.
Okay.
A lot of it is economic.
Yeah.
People just say, I'm going to spend all this money on the wake and the coffin and the hearse to put it in the ground and bury it and never see it again. Whereas I could, do the, religious, faithful honors, cremate them, put them in a niche, put them in the ground, and now I'm looking at $3,000 versus $15,000. Many times, though, on the way to the cemetery, it winds up on the closet in your house, the basement of the funeral home, and never gets anywhere.
Oh.
So, if you're going to go that far and get the urn and get the cremated remains in there, why not finish it with the peaceful rest that they have earned? Yeah. As opposed to your shoe closet.
We're talking about that specifically, and people all over the world who are listening, you have your own places we may know of, but this will at least help you find the vehicle
pass a graveyard
Yeah.
at some point. And somewhere on that graveyard, generally the fence on the way in,
Yeah.
there's a telephone number or a QR code or something that will get you to whoever responsible for that ground. Talk to them. Find out, how full are you? You know, do you have a lot of room left?
Yeah.
Do you have a mausoleum that I can use to put a urn into a niche? Do you have an outdoor columbarium? Do you have, you know, flat markers versus big stones? There's all kinds of things you can do. Or is there another cemetery nearby? Certainly Google Maps for the geography around you is easy to do, and I think you can do that just about anywhere in the world. But the big questions like, am I going to be buried in ground or am I going to be cremated? Probably the first thing that you want, because that then drives the costs and all the other things that go with that. But like anything else, it's like you took a driving test and you were frightened to death you weren't going to pass. You did all the studying, you did the driving all around, getting ready for it. You took it, you passed, the fear is over. Now you never think about it. It literally is the same thing. Get over the initial uneasiness about dealing with your own mortality and your families. And once you educate yourself, it becomes a very practical matter in terms of dealing with your business. You can't accumulate all that you do and all this and just say, I'm going to let it be someone else's problem. Because inevitably you're going to wind up being the state's problem. The state's going to take your money.
There you go. We don't want that. So if anybody has any other questions, you can always ask me on my YouTube channel, Caregiver Success, or and I can reach out to Kenn for you, give you some information to get a hold of Kenn. He's specifically in Connecticut, but he is an expert in this field for Americans, I guess, specifically for us.
Around the world.
Around the world. Let's make it around the world. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today on Caregiver Success. Nancy from YouTube here, and we'll see you at the next video. Thanks, Kenn, for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's great. Bye now, everyone.